This audio recording is intended to facilitate the gradual release of confidential documents pertaining to a top-secret exchange program where 12 U.S. military personnel went to the planet Serpo in the Zeta Reticuli star system between the years 1965 and 1978. This is posting 14 by Anonymous. Note by Bill Ryan. This posting was sent directly to myself and was not sent to Victor Martinez. It is presented below verbatim. Nothing has been added or edited. There also seems to be an anomaly, as 102 appears to be a different person from the team commander in the information above. I invite other pairs of eyes to check. Team Commander 102, Assistant Team Commander 203, Team Pilot Number 1 225, Team Pilot Number 2, 308, Linguist Number 1, 420, Linguist Number 2, 475, Biologist, 518, Scientist Number 1, 633, Scientist Number 2, 661, Doctor Number 1, 700, Doctor Number 2, 754, Security, 899. This is posting 6 by Anonymous. Note by Bill Ryan. This posting was received by myself while at the Loughlin UFO Congress, Nevada. There are 2 parts. Number 1, a sample of the Eben written language, original on left, sample enlargement on right. Click on either for a higher resolution image. A further installment of the team commander's log posted verbatim as before. The final sentence is also verbatim and apparently incomplete. It was difficult to speak science to the Ebens. How do we explain Einstein? How do they explain their Einstein? We had a difficult time relating our science to them. However, they seem to understand our physics and chemistry quicker than we can. We managed to observe some strange things about their technology. First, we took apart one of the locators they placed on our belts. It wasn't easy. There were no screws or bolts holding it together. We had to break the thing. The electronics inside was nothing we had ever observed. There were no transistors, tubes, rectifiers, coils, or other electronic components like our technology. This thing had just wires and some bulges in the wires at certain points. There was 2 components which none of use have ever seen. We could not use our frequency counter to determine the frequency it transmitted and received. It was out of our range. 633 and 661 used some other equipment to analyze the thing but couldn't understand it. We asked the Eben scientist, who we called EBE4. The problem was the translation EBE2 had to translate because EBE4 didn't speak English. A lost is lost in translation even though EBE2 does a pretty good job with English. We showed EBE4 one of our portable radios. The Motorola FM radio was pretty complex to us. It was new and contained 4 channels. 661 took apart the radio in front of EBE4, explained the parts and the different crystals we used for frequency. EBE4 couldn't understand it. He seemed as lost with our radio as we did with theirs. EBE2 told us that EBE4 couldn't understand the radio or how it worked. So that was our dilemma. How do we exchange science? Each of our civilizations must learn from the other, so we decided to begin a school. Our first days were pretty tough. We started with simple things which we thought would be similar to what they would know. We chose light. 661, who did some teaching before, started with wavelengths. 661 started with non-visible light and the different angstroms. Then 661 showed them the spectrum of light. 661 showed them cosmic rays and how we measured them. Then he went to gamma rays, X-rays, and ultraviolet light. 661 explained that light was what we called electromagnetic waves. Over a period of Eben days, 661 explained everything he knew about light, frequencies, and a description of the frequency bands. During this time, several other Ebens came in and listened. EBE2 was extremely tasked with translating this. EBE2 had a difficult time explaining everything 661 said because she didn't know the Eben words for everything, but she did an outstanding job of describing what 661 was saying. I don't think EBE4 got everything 661 said, but it didn't take long for EBE4 to realize what 661 was describing. 661 then showed EBE4 a repair manual for one of our test equipment. Since everything or almost everything we brought was military, it was a military manual. The manual contained schematics of the circuits. EBE4 was completely lost, but eventually figured out what 661 was showing him was the inside of the test equipment. 661 then started showing the basics of electricity, Ohm's laws, different formulas to figure voltage in amperes. EBE4 was so confused to say the least, but one of the other Ebens who had come in to listen grasped the idea quickly. We called this Eben EBE5, or the Einstein. This Eben was smart, exceptionally smart. After 3 years, we finally meet an Eben who can grasp our science. The only problem is he couldn't speak English, but he asked questions which EBE4 didn't really do. Although it took several lessons to teach EBE5 what each letter meant in a formula, EBE5 finally realized what we were saying. This Eben must have an IQ of 300. EBE5 actually solved some simple problems set up by 661. Basic electricity, solving for the amount of resistance in a circuit, simple things like that. It was a remarkable scene. EBE5 became our A student. We couldn't get rid of the guy. He followed us around and asked questions through EBE2. When EBE2 wasn't available, he would simply point and shrug his shoulders. We'd speak to him in English or have 420 or 475 translate to him, but only 420 could understand most of what EBE5 was saying. This came to another interesting point. EBE5 looked a little different than the rest of the Ebens. During the last several years, we have noticed some of the Ebens, especially ones who live up north, look different. Their heads seem to be bigger. They have a more weathered-looking face. EBE5 is from the north. He lives in the second village to our north. The distance is approximately 5 kilometers. I drew the map in entry 4432, showing all the villages in the north. I'm sure they have more villages further away, but we haven't visited them yet. EBE5 also does not have a mate. This is strange but not totally uncommon. We have found several Ebens without mates. We haven't delved into the personal life of EBE5, but 518 wants to. I explained in one entry about the Eben technology when it comes to screws, bolts, etc. They don't have any. Everything they make is sealed with some sort of solder or melting method. When we visited their manufacturing plant, we were amazed at how efficient they were with manufacturing furniture, their helicopters or flying devices. We still haven't seen their main spacecraft manufacturing plant. It must be in the far west and south. I'm sure we will visit the place someday. We still have 7 years, or at least 7 Earth years left. As I mentioned before, we have totally lost track of Earth time. We gave that up many of our years ago. We have gauged our time on Eben time, which is extremely complex, as I mentioned before. We had a feast today. What a feast. We used our last sea rations, but the Ebens didn't really care for our food. We did kill a beast. As I mentioned before, the Ebens allowed us to kill beast for meat. The meat isn't really bad. 899 says it tastes like bear, which I never ate. But Ebens look at us very strange when we eat meat. Strange that they can clone creatures and other species of humans, but they can't eat meat. How strange they are. But they allow us to do just about anything we want, and eating meat is something we need for the protein. We use the last of our salt and pepper, which does make eating their food more of a challenge. The Ebens don't have anything similar to salt and pepper. They do have an herb, as we call it, something like oregano, which they use. It has a tart taste, but we have developed a taste for it. The feast was great. We participated in the dances, which the Ebens really like. They get great pleasure dancing and playing their strange games. I described the games before, but this feast we saw something different. The game was played like chess, but with Eben standing on a large square area of the compound. The squares were divided into 24 sets. Each set had another 2 spots. Just how or why the Ebens moved was a mystery to us. One of the Ebens would say a word, and then another Eben would move. It appeared that it was a team game. 6 Ebens on each side. We couldn't figure it out, but at the end, the Ebens danced with each other, signifying a victory, we think. It was a fun day. My team played softball with some hard-nosed Ebens who had learned the game. Well, for the most part, they still haven't figured out that they have to catch the ball before it hits the ground, but they had fun. We have found some extremely gifted athletes among the Ebens. Then again, we found some who had no athletic ability. Just like humans, our softball game ended when the rains came. We ended up inside the community building. We finished our meals and separated to our living area. As we do each day, we have our end-of-day briefing. We check each other for psychological condition and medical health. Our day ends and we start our 8 hours of rest. Ebens have a different period of time, as I mentioned before. They rest about 4 hours for every 10 hours working time. But we must consider their hour is longer and that their days are longer. So we stop using our time and use the Eben time. It is difficult to understand, but this is only a diary. Once I return to Earth, I can explain the time difference and how we had to use their time instead of ours. I keep writing about the time in every diary entry, but it is important to note that even though we have been here for about 3 years, Earth time, we have given up Earth time and utilized the Eben time. We tried to use their 2 suns as a counting system, but that didn't work. We then tried to use our own watches, but that didn't work. So we gave up our timepieces and just used the Eben time tower. Each village has one, and it is easy to understand the symbols. Each symbol means a certain time and certain work period. EBE2 came by after the feast. EBE2 was concerned with 754. As I mentioned in one past entry, 754 became sick, but he has recovered. We don't know what he suffered, but 700 treated him with penicillin, which worked. We all have had some sort of sickness since we've been here, except 899. That guy is a solid rock. He hasn't been sick, not even a cold. 706 and 754 are keeping detailed records of each team member and their medical and physical condition. We have tried to keep a steady physical fitness program since we arrived. Sometimes we follow it and sometimes we don't. But everyone is in pretty good shape, at least physically. Mentally, that might be another story. Some team members miss Earth, as I do, but no team member has broke down or has needed some type of psychological help from 700 or 754. Our screening process was great. Keeping busy is our medicine. We keep extremely busy exploring and doing our mission goals. At one of our team meetings recently, 203 and myself decided to give up the military greetings, saluting that each member did the first time they saw us. I decided we maintain our military bearing and manners, but we will give up the saluting. Each team member agreed. I have no problem with that. The Ebens just stared at us when we did that, but they also have their greetings. Ebens exchange greetings depending on the time of day. They hug on certain times, touch fingers on other times, and bow at other times. We still haven't figured out why they do that. EBE2 just explained it was a formal greeting method. Ebens live a very strict life. They keep a regimented lifestyle. We have seen some variances, but only by a few. The military keeps everyone in line. The military acts as a police force, as I mentioned before. They do not carry any weapons, but they do have different uniforms, and every Eben respects that uniform. The military are patrolling all the time. They walk in pairs and seem to be extremely friendly, but can be very strict. We saw 2 Ebens walking across a field. 2 military members quickly approached the 2 Ebens and pointed to a building. The 2 Ebens walked into that building with the military members. The military members were yelling something at them. At the time, neither 420 or 475 were available for translation, but I figured those 2 Ebens violated some custom or law. We have been warned by the military when we approach something we are not supposed to approach. The military are very respectful when they deal with us, but they don't allow us to violate any of their customs or laws without warning us. When we first killed one of the sand snakes, we had 6 military members at the scene in no time. It took a great deal of diplomacy to deal with that situation, but the military never touched us nor threatened us. The Ebens have adjusted to us just as we have adjusted to them. We carry on our mission and they allow us to do just about anything. The one forbidden act is not to enter a private living house. We did that once and was politely escorted out by the military. There seems to be more military than actually needed. They do have weapons, as I mentioned before. We rarely see any military member with those weapons, but we have seen them during the alert that occurred some time ago. EBE2 came into our living compound just after one of our rest periods. EBE2 was excited and told us to stay inside and not to exit our living quarters. We asked why, and EBE-2 said that an unknown spacecraft had entered their planet's orbit, but EBE-2 assured us that the military will take care of the problem. We naturally went into our own alert. We issued our weapons and stood by to guard our living area. We violated her instructions and went outside. We watched the skies and saw a lot of air traffic. We then saw all the military members with weapons and something that looked like field packs. They were in full fighting gear, as 899 called it. The alert didn't last very long, and EBE-2 came back, looked at us a little curious, and then told us everything was all right, and the alert was over. We asked her if the unknown spacecraft was identified. She said it wasn't a spacecraft, but just a natural piece of space debris, and left it at that. We didn't believe her, but we had no way of knowing any difference. We returned to our normal routines. Explanation of alien drawing, also known as Eben object. Victor, here is the explanation of the alien drawing or Eben object as referred to on the www.serpo.org website posted by Bill Ryan. A great deal of planning went into the 10-year mission to Serpo, turned into 13 years. Several teams of officials planned what equipment to take. These officials tried to imagine every conceivable situation where certain types of tools and equipment might be needed. One area was capturing the view and makeup of objects, artifacts, and landscapes on Planet Serpo. The mission team took cameras, 16 different types of cameras, and drafting equipment. Although no team member was trained in drafting, 3 team members had drawing experience from their college days. Several different types of drafting templates were taken on the trip. The planning officials tried to envision every type of situation where a template might be needed. The drawing, Eben object, made by the team commander depicts the base of the sundial used globally by the Ebens on Serpo. Each object meant a certain time of the day to the Ebens. When the sun was directed through the sundial onto the object at the base of the sundial, that meant a specific task or change of to the Ebens. For example, it might signal a change in work schedules, a time to rest, a time to eat, a time to celebrate, etc. After a few years, the team learned each symbol and learned the meaning of each symbol. This drawing is a copy of the actual drawing made by the team commander in 1967. The team also took many photographs of the sundial symbols. I know our detractors and skeptics will still harbor doubt about our message and incredible mission, but this will have to suffice for now, short of the actual photographs, which the debunkers would still find problems with. Glad to be in touch with you, and I'll be in contact again soon. Anonymous. And that is the end of this video. If you like things like this, please give this video a thumbs up. Please share this video. And if you're new to the channel, please subscribe. I'll have more things like this. Take care.